What is the Great Awakening? I wanted to make a video on what it is, because it seems to be that no one really knows anymore what that means. There's so many people saying so many different things about what the Great Awakening is all about, and well, the question is, something is happening, right? Something is raising consciousness on this realm that we find ourselves on. More people are waking up, but everyone seems to have a different understanding of what that really means. So I wanted to explore the topic in a bit more depth and breadth to perhaps bring some clarity to the subject, just from my own perspective. So when I first came across the term the Great Awakening, that was obviously in 2020, and I think it was on Instagram or something. I came across some posts about the Great Awakening and raising of consciousness, and this is the end of an old era and the beginning of a new one. And then I came across some kind of channel where they were selling posters and T-shirts that said the Great Awakening, and it had an upside down pyramid that showed like all the conspiracy theory topics. Anywhere from, government control to chemicals and poisons to mind control, all the way up into ultimately becoming one with the creator, and then everything in between. And then ETs and hidden technology and ancient civilizations. So everything was on this map. And that would, that sort of spin me into a rabbit hole of researching a lot of things. And that's what I thought was the Great Awakening. Humanity waking up and realizing that we've been lied to about pretty much everything for centuries at least. And as my journey unfolded, there was an opportunity to experience some professionally guided psychedelics. Okay? And so I was always curious about it, and so I, took advantage of the opportunity, and that's when my life shifted dramatically. And that's when I started realizing that the Great Awakening is not about what's happening out there, what's happening with the world, what's happening with humanity, what's happening with exposure, what's happening with the revealing of all the lies we've been fed, what governments really are, and what they're really for, the control structure that has been clamped down and tightened down on humanity and continues to, at least attempted to be, right, clamped down more and more every day in certain parts of the world more than others. But I started realizing that, wait a second, everything that I had learned about the Great Awakening up to that point was all about, some kind of great revelation about the world, about us, some kind of maybe major disclosure event. People are still talking about that we're going to have this major disclosure event that involves ETs and whatnot. And it may happen. I'm not saying it's not going to, but it was all, everything that the Great Awakening people were talking about was always happening out there in the 3D world. But after my first plant ceremony, with psychedelics, I realized that, whoa, the Great Awakening is actually about what's going on inside of us, what's happening within us, and realizing that everything that is happening on the outside world, in the 3D realm, so to speak, is really just a mirror reflection of what's going on collectively inside of us. we have many people running around these days who are very wounded emotionally, psychologically, mentally. We have many people that are hurting, and the only way they know how to stop hurting themselves is to inflict pain onto others. We have people that are conflicted within themselves, so they cause conflict on the outside world. We have people who are confused within themselves about who they are and where they come from and what their purpose is, so they perpetuate confusion into the outside world. And all the problems that we're dealing with, and fear is a big one. Fear is probably the major one, although fear is like one layer above pain. So ultimately, what we're dealing with, almost everyone is in pain at one level or another, and we're masking the pain with our outward reactions. So something triggers us, we react, the outside responds, and so the cycle continues, right? So we get triggered, we react, they get triggered, they react, we get triggered, we react. And so it's a back and forth ping pong game of reaction and triggering and reaction triggering. And so obviously it makes sense why we are in the place that we are as a species. And also why we have let psychopaths run our governments and run the world, basically. Now, that's a deep well for another day, maybe, because it goes way back. This controller group that you're probably aware of if you're following this channel. But that is our weakness, and that is what these controllers exploit. And of course, they also have black magic spells and their rituals where they impose certain, negatively charged energetics onto humanity and cause trauma on several levels of our soul, several levels of our energy field, and that's when you get trauma-based mind control. And so all the mind control that they're using through the media and through the movies and through entertainment and the music, it's like a 24 cycle of repetitive content that keeps you in a misery loop. Yeah. But anyway, long story short, the Great Awakening is really about looking inside of ourselves, looking deep in the mirror, looking within, and looking at ourselves. What am I doing that's causing pain and suffering and misery and fear in my own life? What am I doing to create the circumstances in my own life that I don't like? Taking 100% full, total, and complete responsibility for everything that happens in your life. And that's a scary thought. Yeah, that's a scary thought for me as well. But there's no way around it, Anyway, to me, that's the Great Awakening. And to be honest, I was very disappointed with Mikki Willis's The Great Awakening movie because it focused on just this one political aspect of how governments are basically trying to be, this superstructure of socioeconomic control modeled via, Karl Marx and, of course, the socialist movement, right? So the socialist dictatorship is going to be implemented with governments, and what can we do? And the only sort of real remedy or resolution he gave at the end, well, get involved in your local politics. And that's the Great Awakening, right? Now, I respect Mikki Willis very much. I met him once, spoke with him and his wife, and without him, I may have not woken up in 2020 thanks to his first pandemic movie. But I think, personally, that's just my opinion, I think that his movie, The Great Awakening, missed the mark because it's about so much more than just the political aspect of things and where the controllers want to take us. in the governmental structures of things. So, long story short, the Great Awakening to me is looking within. Looking within and looking at my patterns, looking at my past, looking at my childhood, and looking at all the repressed emotions and pain and fear and anxiety and self-doubt, all those repressed emotions that were caused primarily throughout childhood, from 0 to 6 years old, but even before birth. During one of my last journeys, I discovered something major about my birth, which I'm not going to get into today. That is a big topic. So, but it's really about getting back to ourselves, to our soul, finding our way back out of the mind, out of the fictional constructs of the mind, which is really ego. It's all fictional stuff. It's made up. It is based upon the repressed emotions that we encountered and were exposed to when we were children. And that's the baseline, that's the foundation, so to speak, upon which the ego has built itself. So it's even a structure by which your very own thought creation, the way by which you create thought, is influenced by those negative emotions that sit very, very deeply in your core, usually in the root and the sacral chakra. That's where most of that stuff sits, at least for me. And I know for my brothers and sisters who are on this path with me too. So, there are many modalities where you can tap into that thing and start releasing that. One of them is the emotion code, body code, and belief code. You can find that on discoverhealing.com, I believe it's called. And you can start releasing some of that with a trained practitioner. But it's not a complete process. It helps a lot, absolutely, yes. But if you want to get rid of the foundational, heavy hitting emotions that sit so deep, I don't think there's any other way except doing a professionally guided psychedelics journey. Now, I say professionally guided for a reason, because you're going to see within the next few years, and especially you may already be seeing it, the psychedelics movement is now getting a lot more clout, because there's wonderful studies being done at many universities all over the world. And so you have, the faux capitalist structure, sinking their teeth and their tentacles into that opportunity. So we're going to see, similar to what happened to marijuana, right? From this sacred ancient plant that our ancestors have kept sacred for thousands of years, you're going to see that being commercialized and collateralized and securitized and just being, reduced down to another commodity. And the healing aspect and the community aspect and the sacredness of it all, it's just going to fall by the wayside. So it is up to us who understand the sacredness of these plants to keep it that way. And lastly, the Great Awakening is really, like I said, getting back in touch with your soul, because we don't really know who we are. I didn't know who I was until I discovered my soul. Until I discovered that I am a soul first that's inhabiting a body, not the other way around. But the tricky part is that, all these suppressed fears and pains are like a wall around your heart, and your heart is the portal to your soul. So as children, when we're exposed to these heavy emotions, we don't have any defense. We don't know what's going on. It's just painful. So we shut down our emotional system. We shut down the heart, and we enclose it, we encrust it with an armor so that we don't have to feel the pain anymore. But guess what? This armor stays on there until we start chipping away at it and taking it off. But that means we're going to have to go back to those moments when we first were exposed to those emotions. And that's painful. But in my opinion, there's no other way except to feel those emotions fully again. Feel them fully. The way they came into your system, that's the same way they have to get out of your system. You know, there's, like I said, the other modalities, they work, they help. They help unlock and release some of the locks and the vault doors to those emotions. But ultimately, if you want to get rid of it all, you're going to have to feel it. And that's another thing that we can see in the world. People are not feeling. Where's the compassion? Where is the love for each other? Right? Some people have no problem whatsoever killing another human, moral, sentient being. And in the worst case, children. Think about the amount of repression and pain someone must be in order to justify in their own mind it's okay to kill a child. That's the level of pain we're dealing with here. And it's going to take, I don't know how long it's going to take, but one message that I keep hearing through this work is heal yourself, right? You can't control the outer world. We can't. And if we try, well, we're just going to beat our head against the wall over and over again. So what we can do is heal ourselves, commit to our own inner healing, face the past, face our pain, uproot it, and get it out of our system. And it's going to be uncomfortable, but it must be done. That is the healing journey. That is the hero's journey, right? The hero with 1,000 faces. All these amazing movies like The Matrix and the Star Wars, the first Star Wars movies, and even the Bible. It's a story of our inner hero's journey. It's a story about our own inner hero's journey. And that's why this content, these movies, these books are so wildly popular, because there's something in them that resonates deeply with our subconscious. We know there's truth in those books, in those movies, somewhere on a deep level. We feel it, but we can't express it. We don't know what it is. We just know that we love this movie or we love this book, and so we keep reading it or we keep watching it, and we say that's my favorite movie or that's my favorite book. When in reality, it's just a reminder. Hey, you can go on your own hero's journey, but it starts by looking within. So that, to me, is the Great Awakening. What is it to you? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your take on the Great Awakening and what it means to you. Are you on the healing journey? Have you started looking within yourself? Tell me, I'd love to know. And thank you for watching.